Alright, so today I have a bit of an issue with materials. So, got the epoxy sculpt here and, well, yeah. And it's not much better in this one. So I got a care package coming with some more, but it's not going to be here for 1, maybe 2 days. And that's counting today. So I've got to figure out a couple videos that I could put out on the minimal of materials, and I think I've got one nailed down. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is plastic sheeting. I actually use this stuff all the time as kind of like a mobile place to cut stickers, as you can see here, and every now and then I think I press some epoxy sculpt on there and it's kind of like hardened. But I want to use this material as a capping material. Now I haven't explored capping before, and it's something that's very popular. Tony Fisher does it all the time. GR Cubed has also been doing it a lot with some of his big cuboid mods. I'll leave a link to both of their channels in the description of this video, and I think that it's something that's worth exploring because I just haven't done it. Now I've used plastic sheeting as a coring material for extensions, and when I made my 3x9x9, that's exactly what I did, and it works really well. But as far as actually capping pieces is concerned, I know next to nothing. So what I want to do today is I want to make a puzzle that's been suggested to me by pretty much everyone, and that is a windmill cube. But I'm not going to make a perfect windmill cube because I want to make a different kind of windmill cube, the windmill tower. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut from the corner of this corner here, and I'm going to cut up to the corner of this edge piece here, and that's going to give a flat area. And then I'm going to do the same thing here, and then here, and then here, and I'm going to end up with what looks like a tower with probably the same cubic dimensions as a 2x2x3, or maybe something a little bit wider than that. We'll see what happens. But the main thing to take away from this is that I'm going to be using plastic sheeting to cap all of the pieces. So, if that's everything nailed down, let's get started.
So before I even started with this modification, I could tell this was going to be a bit of an interesting build. So I started by prizing off some of the center caps, and then I tightened up the puzzle so that it wouldn't turn. This is nothing out of the ordinary, and it's typically how I start the majority of my modifications. After I did that, I took the puzzle over to my bandsaw, and I tilted the table on my bandsaw so that it lined up between the corner of the corner piece and the corner of the edge piece. I proceeded to cut the 4 edges off, and after I was left with this weird tower shape, I took it over to my belt sander and I sanded down all the faces just so they were even. After that was done, because I had exposed all of the internals of the pieces, I dripped some super glue in there just to make sure all of the internal caps didn't split open, and then I disassembled the puzzle. I marked out the areas to cut on the plastic sheeting, and then I took it over to my bandsaw so that I could cut it out into small squares that I could glue onto each of the pieces. I cut the pieces out a little oversized as per usual, which is something that you should get into the habit of doing. However, when I glued them onto each of the pieces, I didn't take into consideration where I was going to be sanding them to. Because of this, some of the pieces didn't stick out far enough that I couldn't build up the shape that I wanted on the exterior of the pieces. This will become a lot more apparent a little later on in this build. But anyways, after all the pieces were glued up and everything was capped, it was time to round off each of the pieces so that I could reassemble the puzzle. I took each of the pieces over to my belt sander and I sanded them all down so that they would fit together. I reassembled the puzzle and I made sure that everything turned, even though it looked terrible. And after everything would fit together, I filled all the gaps between the plastic sheeting and the piece itself with some superglue and baking soda. This just fills in all of the gaps so that the pieces look nice and solid, as opposed to just having caps that are loosely attached to the pieces. It also makes everything look a lot nicer. But after everything was assembled and it fit together nicely, I took it over to my belt sander so I could sand down all of the faces, that way they would line up together and everything would be the same shape. I had to take note of the fact that it was getting pretty late in the day and the sun was starting to go down. Now this is the point in the modification where I'd realized that the caps on the pieces didn't extend out far enough to sand it into the correct shape. This is something that I definitely could have foreseen, however I just was too stupid to actually realize until too late in the build. This kind of job is actually really difficult to fix and it requires a lot of extending, and it would really help if I used epoxy sculpt, however this late in the day that just wasn't an option. So with the sun going down and this puzzle looking like a real nightmare to fix at this state, I was ready to call this puzzle a failure. I'd learned everything I pretty much needed to learn about this material, but I just hadn't done this puzzle to the best of my abilities. I really should have known better, but you live and learn.
It's a real shame, but I definitely learnt my lesson from how this material behaves, so next time around, hopefully I don't do this. I mean, I'm sure I'll remember not to do it next time around. But anyways, I'm sorry that this puzzle was a failure. I'm totally kicking myself because it really easily could have been prevented, but you live and learn. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Did you really think that a celestial body as big as the one that just wowed the entirety of the US with its ecliptical nature was going to stop me from producing a puzzle within the 24-hour time limit that I set myself? You clearly haven't been paying attention. I have enough caffeine to wake the late Robin Williams. Buckle up, princess, we're going for a ride. Okay, I will not be defeated by time. I still have until midnight to actually do this puzzle, and I'm already pretty close to actually finishing it. All I have to do is finish off the centerpieces and kind of figure out how I'm going to go about getting them to be all cool, and extending all the pieces when necessary, and rounding them all off, and doing my usual finishing up, modifying witchcraft, and all of that stuff. Not too difficult to understand. I'm just tired, fueled by caffeine, and ready to go. That's it, there's no script anymore, it's just time to do the things and make the stuff happen. Let's get this show on the road.
So after I had established that I was too stubborn to let this puzzle go, I decided to finish off all of the pieces. I had a few hours up my sleeve, and so I dripped super glue onto each of the pieces, and then I dunked them into the baking soda to build up an area that I could sand down into the shape that I wanted. Now this worked pretty well, and a couple of the pieces turned out just fine, but I quickly realized that the area that I was building up was so big that it was a lot easier to just clip off a small piece of plastic sheeting, and then glue that to the area and then sand that down, instead of building up baking soda and super glue. Although I still had the issue of filling the centerpieces, the way I went around doing this was I used the center caps that already fit on the puzzle, and I tilted them to the degree that I wanted, and then dripped super glue between the center cap and the center piece, and then I built up the entire area around it with super glue and baking soda. I used a little bit of plastic sheeting here and there on some of the large areas, and I sanded these pieces down into the shape that I wanted, although it's important to note that I already had the puzzle tensioned to a desirable tension before I started doing this. I wasn't able to access the screws at this point, so I had to think about that ahead of time. After that was done, it was just a case of finishing up all of the pieces, which took a lot longer than it looks like in this video, and then I reassembled the puzzle. And here it is, the Windmill Tower, which actually looks a lot more like a cube than I was expecting, is complete. Now I didn't bother painting this puzzle or stickering it up because I think the general gist of the build of this puzzle has been proven. This puzzle did not defeat me, but it certainly took it out of me. I've learned a lot about plastic sheeting that I will definitely implement in my later builds, but anyways, I'm going to wrap this video up by handing over to me with the live commentary.
So to bring this video to a close, a puzzle that I thought defeated me had in fact not defeated me, although it certainly took a lot of work to get this puzzle done. I think it could look a lot better if I had more time and better materials, i.e. epoxy sculpt, a material that I've used for many years and am comfortable with, but I still think I learned a lot about plastic sheeting, and it's certainly going to be something that I'll implement in my later builds. But anyways, I've already ended this video once before, so I'll simply say, never give up, and good night.